Life is so busy, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. Is there anyone else coming in?
Melissa.
Jerry.
Jerry's not
Jerry's not coming? Oh, she needs it.
Jerry's not coming today?
She's not?
They're busy upstairs and she's helping clean.
Okay.
Hold on.
Can we pull her down for this one?
I don't know if Mama's coming.
I know she's one to just jump in, but this would be good for her. So the next, we only have 3 more sessions left. That's the wild thing.
After
right?
this one or including this one?
Including this one.
Okay.
So 2 more after this. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask each of you to prioritize it. I know it's easy to get pulled into the 900 other things that you need to be pulled into, but just prioritize self-care as we just wrap this up, because the next 3 lessons really pull everything that we've been talking about together. So what I'm really interested, and we could have this little talk before Robert gets back, is I want to know how things are going, right? And I want you to be really honest, because I'm going to tell you something now that could shift your vantage point. We often stress the importance of a formal practice, and it's true, it's so important, right? Because neurologically, we need that time to really strengthen the neural pathways in the brain, right? So we've talked about that, and remember, every time you catch yourself getting kind of tied up in a thought or memory or emotion or feeling or just wandering, right? Just my mind's wandering, I've been pulled away, I've been distracted. Every single time you notice that you've been pulled away or entangled in something else besides present moment awareness, that's strengthening your capacity to return to the prefrontal cortex. It's like doing bicep curls for your brain, really, right? So you're not doing it wrong. So, and that frustration that happens in the beginning when you're a new practitioner, that settles quite a bit, right? I promise you, because I've been there. So that's how I know this to be true. And I've taught hundreds and hundreds of people how to do these practices. And I've had them come to me afterwards and say, yes, that's settled a bit, okay? That's not to say that even if you're practicing for 20 years, you could have a bad formal practice that makes you feel frustrated, right? So that can happen too. That happens to me, all right? But I attended a talk last week with a psychologist. He's a neuropsychologist, and he's also a longtime practitioner of mindfulness meditation. His name's Judson Brewer. You could look him up online if you were curious about it. But he was talking about a study that he and his team did. And this study was really interesting to me because it studied beginner practitioners of insight meditation. So exactly what you guys are doing, all right? And what he emphasized is what is most impactful for new students are those short micro practices. So remember, it is not how long the meditations are. So don't push yourself into that, because that could be very stressful. We could put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Jerry, thanks for coming.
Thank you for visiting.
It's just consistency. So if 2 minutes feels doable, start there and stay there for a long time until you're craving more time, right? So this desire to push ahead into these longer sits, it's just your natural, that's our humanness. We always want to kind of move ahead. We want to achieve something. It's our striving nature, okay? But it's not necessary. You could just set your timer for 2 minutes and it'll start there, and it'll start working there as long as you're doing it frequently. So daily. Okay? Is that helpful? All right, these micro practices are also your informal practices that we're talking about. The touching, kind of touching the doorway before entering the next room. Pausing, feeling your feet on the ground. Taking a deep conscious breath. Okay, those matter. Those practices matter so much. All right, so stand up. Before we get into some of this deeper work, following where we started last week, continuing our talk on feelings and recognizing feelings separate from emotions, and then we're going to talk a lot about meeting these really strong emotions with compassion. And where do we start compassion practices? So we're going to start there today. But right now, we're going to get rid of everything that's happening to you up until now today. Okay? So put your arms up. Have we done this absorption practice? No. Shake. Really shake. Let your fingers shake, every finger. If you need to spread out, create some space in the room, spread out. Good, especially over there. Just maybe step a little further down. Give people room. Shake. Shake. Really shake. You could close your eyes. Just shake it out. So wild animals, when they're stressed, right, and studied in their natural habitat, when they're experiencing a lot of stress, they shake. They literally shake it off of themselves. So get rid of it. Whatever you've been doing today, just let it go. I know the order didn't come in for the salmon, but we're going to let that go. Okay? Just let it go. Good. Shake it out, shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. Shake, shake, shake. Faster, 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 faster. Now stop. Good. Keep your arms up. Set your gaze down. Soften your gaze. And let each finger feel very, very, very heavy. Ground your feet. Notice your heartbeat. Notice the energy in your breath. And let it be so. And now very slowly, as if the air was thick like honey or molasses, so slow that you wouldn't even notice that my arms are starting to descend. That your arms are starting to descend. Just letting the hands and fingertips feel very heavy. Pay close attention to that vibrational quality and each finger in your hands, in your wrists, in your arms, as the arms slowly come down. And as the arms come down by the sides, just close your eyes for a moment. Notice the quality of your mind in this moment. Open your eyes and come back into the space. Okay, you can take a seat. That absorption practice, how did you feel when you were doing it? What did you notice?
My arms got cold.
Okay.
I was like, I don't know if it's like that, but but like it got cold. Like I could feel like my limbs getting cold. Like they were heavy and cold. Like I could just feel them just falling.
My heart pulsated on every fingertip.
Awesome. What else?
I'm exhausted.
Tired, heavy, sore even?
Yeah, I felt pain.
Sore.
Discomfort,
Shoulders.
right? Shoulders, what else?
Shoulders.
Notice that nobody noticed that their mind was thinking. Your attention was in your body completely. Sometimes we just need to pull our attention out of the mind and put it in the body. Those absorption practices are extremely helpful, especially when stress has a lot of entanglements, right? When you feel caught up in it, right? Sometimes the embodied mindfulness practice, which that was an embodied practice, right? We stimulated the body to pull the mind out of thinking. So your mind was in your fingertips. Who said that? I felt the vibrational quality of all my fingers. The mind had a job to do. We gave it a job to do, and it stilled. So who noticed the mind when we stopped? What did the mind feel like?
I just felt like I was just totally at rest in my mind, and I just wanted to stay there for a little bit longer. So it was like, wow, I'm not thinking about anything.
Yes.
It was great.
Yeah. And it's, we spent just a few minutes doing that, but you could just literally do it for a minute. I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to shake, go into a closet, right? Or in the bathroom or something, right? So animals in nature, they do that. They shake off, right? They shake it off.
I can feed my family. I'd probably do it.
Do it with your kids. This is a great practice to share with your children, right? To share with people that don't want to talk about meditation, perhaps your parents or sister, I don't know, whoever, right? Somebody that you know is struggling and needs to just calm down. Do it with them, right? Remember, these practices are here to be shared, right? So we could share them. You don't have to be a teacher or an expert. Share it. Okay, but especially kids. My kids love when I do crazy stuff like this. They're like, Mommy, what are you doing? Upside down again, right? So, just do it. Be playful. It's a playful exercise, but it's extremely useful. And now we can all be here. Okay? All right. So we left off last week, and, feelings and emotions, they are tough. And what we start noticing is that there's this physical nature, there's this physical quality of these things coming up. So what we're doing is we're training up these skills that we want to train up: tenderness, openness, compassion, ease, loving kindness. Right? We're training up in these skills. Joy, sympathetic joy. Meaning, if I'm having a terrible day and somebody I love and care about is experiencing joy, can I experience joy and still be having a terrible day? Right? Sometimes we need to train that skill up so that we could be there in all parts of our lives in different ways. Okay, and all of these qualities begin with the practices of the heart, and they begin by really learning to trust the capacity of the heart as being boundless as a clear blue sky. And the capacity of the heart can hold all of it. It could hold all of the pain, all of the suffering. It could hold all of the joy and love and compassion. All of it could be included in there. And when we start trusting that the heart has the capacity to hold it, we could start turning towards those discomforts with more ease. That's not to say that when we're confronted with deep suffering, that it doesn't touch our hearts, that it doesn't take us to our knees. That too. But how can we be with the suffering and even see that as precious, as a part of life? How could we include it? And how does that knowing open us to this common humanity that we keep talking about. So we're going to start with a compassion practice, a loving kindness practice, because quite frequently the hardest part about compassion practices, and I will share with you that they were not easy for me. The metta practices felt really corny, right? I didn't feel authentic, and I didn't want to practice them. That was my initial reaction to them. But I will tell you, I forced myself because I knew that's where the work was. When we're developing awareness, there's always two parts of that. Yes, the mind trainings. Yes, learning to, focus and concentrate and build resilience. Yes. But if we ignore the compassion practices, if we ignore loving kindness, we'll always turn away from the suffering. And building that resilience, building the heart resilience starts there with compassion towards oneself. And it's not easy. Why? Why is it hard?
In essence, it makes you tough. You go through hard things, you just toughen up.
Right.
And you close some doors that you wouldn't really open.
Yeah.
You know anybody. You try to become non-vulnerable.
Absolutely. You start protecting yourself.
Start protecting yourself, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In this business, for sure.
Right. In the business of being human, too.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Everyone does it. And we're really hard on ourselves. In this Western culture especially, we're hard on ourselves. We think we should be doing more, that we're not doing enough, that we need to be paying closer attention, that we need to not pay attention. We're always questioning where we're supposed to be or who we're supposed to be. So there's this inner critic inside that likes to speak very loudly. And oftentimes it's easier just to shut down and not listen to any of it. And that shuts down the heart. We talked about trauma earlier, and that 1 in 4 of us in this room, 1 in 4 Americans have experienced severe trauma in their lives. And many of you have come to me on your own and shared what that meant for you. And I want you to know, I see you. We're all in this human experience together. But when we're confronted with trauma, especially at a very young age, we shut down emotionally. We close the heart, we protect ourselves, because that's how we survived. That's how we were able to survive it. And so those patterns get really sticky. They hang out for a long time because that 5-year-old who couldn't manage through what was happening around them, that shutting down, that 5-year-old doesn't exist anymore. Right? We're here in these adult bodies and we're still leaning into patterns that we use to protect ourselves at that very young age. And so where does the trauma go? It stays in the body. It absolutely does. I absolutely believe that. And we see it. And if we look at soldiers that have served, our veterans, my father served 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. He was on the river boats. And he's never been the same, ever. He cut off. That trauma was so intense, and he just shut down emotionally. But every time he's confronted with his heart opening, he just falls apart. He can't handle it. And if we don't look in, if we don't turn towards it and start working through those patterns and seeing them for what they are and honoring that 5-year-old or that veteran or that adult that suffered trauma, honoring that part of us that used those methods to just simply survive, then we'll never heal. We can't get to the other side of it. But that process is very long, and we have to be really courageous, and we need tools that will support us. So the tools that we're introducing today is a good starting point. Self-compassion, how do we do it? There's a story, and I may have shared this with you. I think Christine and I may have shared it in the beginning. The Dalai Lama came about 20 years ago. He comes quite often, and he meets with scientists, neuroscientists specifically, psychologists, psychiatrists, lead teachers. Some of the teachers I've worked with were in this meeting, and my teacher Jack Kornfield tells this story, and he met with this big group of experts that are teaching insight practices, secular meditation practices. And he said, what is your biggest challenge in teaching your Western students these methods and practices? And the overwhelming answer to that question was, they hate themselves. These people don't love themselves. There's hatred there, self-hatred. And the Dalai Lama's interpreter did not have a word in the Tibetan language for self-hatred. He didn't understand what it meant. So it is largely something that's coming out of the Western culture, this striving force of trying to be perfect. We can't be. We're all flawed. Right? We can't possibly be perfect. There's just things about me that I'm going to struggle with. There's other things that I'm going to do really, really well. Right? But I can't be perfect. No one can. So the thought of being compassionate towards those parts of ourselves that are really struggling and full of pain is hard. It's hard work, and it brings up often a lot of barriers that we just want to just turn away from it. I don't want to do this. It doesn't feel comfortable. I don't feel authentic. All those things that I saw in the beginning. So the way in is by kind of tricking ourselves, and I'm going to teach you that. And it's what we're going to work with over the next 2 weeks. Okay? So we're going to start. So the rule for this, I'm going to sit, is that we're going to practice in a way that we're sharing words out loud. Those words are going to feel uncomfortable for some of you, but they're nothing, extraordinary. So, may I feel ease is one of the slogans, right? So this is what you could expect. But as you're saying it, it might feel just weird, right? Because you're not used to putting your voice out there in the room. When I say a slogan, we'll all repeat it together. If you don't feel comfortable repeating it, don't, just listen. Soften your ears and listen, okay? We'll start by, and I'm going to talk to you about traditional metta practices. Now the word metta, what does that mean? Metta means loving kindness, kindness towards oneself, kindness towards other people, kindness towards other beings, kindness towards, our community, or loving friendliness, right? So how can I be a better friend towards myself, towards the people around me, towards strangers even? So whatever word you feel most aligned with is fine, but that's what metta means. Compassion practices are very intermingled with metta practices. But compassion practices are generally either towards oneself or one other person. So it's really training up this skill in compassion, which leads to empathy. And being able to sit with somebody that's suffering and not feel like we have to fix it. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes if I'm in the thick of it, if I'm in the muck of life, I don't want anyone to fix me. I just want somebody to sit beside me. And that's hard to do when you're on the other side of it. It's hard to sit next to someone that's really suffering and just be empathetic. So these skills, as we train them up, will lead to the development of that, where we don't feel that we have to fix all the suffering of the world, or we're not responsible for all the suffering of the world, but we could just be with it. And it's not going to tear us apart, right? So with this practice, what we're doing is I'd like for you right now to close your eyes and just bring to mind a being in your life, a person, an animal, a child, a grandparent, a friend, someone in your life that is so easy to love. There's no difficulties with this being. It's somebody that just fills your heart with joy. And if you could just bring this one being into this space in your heart, and imagine this space of the heart as this light-filled orb, this golden light. And if you could just visualize this person in front of you and turning towards you. Notice how that feels in the heart space. And now imagine this person saying these words to you. And remember, I am going to say the slogan and then we'll repeat it together. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you, let's say that together, may you be filled with loving kindness. Just take a deep breath. See if you could really feel into your heart space as we're going through these phrases, these slogans. May you live with ease. May you live with ease. May you be free from inner and outer enemies. May you be free from inner and outer enemies. Again, take a deep breath. May you be happy and free. May you be happy and free. And just pause with that for a moment. And imagine that very special being in your life. See if you could just look into those eyes. Perhaps they're smiling at you right now. And now I want that to just dissolve, that visualization. And I'd like you now to invite in another being of light in your life that's very easy to be with, very easy to love. Somebody you really look forward to spending time with. And just invite them into that warmth of the heart, that glowing orb of golden light.
Mm-hmm.
And you could imagine these two beings even standing together, if that's helpful, perhaps even holding hands and looking towards you And again, imagining these two beings of light sending these phrases out directly to you. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you live with ease. May you live with ease. May you be free from inner and outer enemies. May you be free of inner and outer enemies. May you be happy and free. May you be happy and free. And you could even place your right hand on your heart if that feels comforting. Just take a deep breath. Notice the weight of your hand on your heart. Feel the inhales and out breaths. The rise and fall of the chest. And gazing out into those two beings that we invited into this experience, looking at them and knowing in this boundless capacity of the heart that they wish these phrases onto you wholeheartedly. We're now going to invite the phrases in from ourselves to ourselves with the support of these beings of light that support us completely, that love us deeply. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I live with ease. May I live with ease. May I be free of inner and outer enemies. May I be free of inner and outer enemies. May I be happy and free. May I be happy and free. Just taking a few breaths now and noticing this space of the heart. See if you could connect to any tones or feelings there. And if the hand's still placed on the heart, you could relax it down and just tuck your chin down. And slowly, in your own time, just invite the eyes to open and the light to flood in. And we'll come into the space together. So how was that for you? I just really am curious. I'd love for you to share if you feel comfortable.
Emotional for me.
Yeah. It's okay. Let's just sit with that for a moment. Just inviting that really strong emotion into the space. Knowing that this human experience is so precious. And just feeling into that connection that we all have with knowing. Knowing suffering. These practices can really stir things up. Does anyone else want to share? Did anyone feel warmth and openness? No? Yes. Depending on life, right, is what we're going to be confronted with. And sometimes we'll go into practices like that and they'll feel impossible. And sometimes we'll go into practices like that and they'll feel incredibly supportive. And I promise you that if you were confronted with difficulties there, the way to the other side is through. It absolutely is. And sometimes we need more support to get there. Absolutely. You know, I've needed it. But whatever came up for you, it came up for a reason, right? And it's asking to be listened to a little. Right? These parts of ourselves, when they surface, they're often just looking for some attention and acknowledgement. We have professionals within our company. We have therapists and psychologists and psychotherapists and that are really trained in supporting you. So if you need some extra support as we're going through this, please let us know and we'll put you in contact with them. And you could just reach out to us privately and it won't be shared. Okay? The more you drop into those opportunities to train up in that work, the heart work, the easier it gets. Okay? So what possibly was a lot of resistance, thanks for coming back, could turn into this beautiful chance for opening and healing. For me, it was the only way in, what we just did. So traditionally, metta practices start out with I. That's traditional practices. So remember, coming from different cultures where they have less resistance for self-compassion, they start there. And I know this to be true, that as Americans living in northeastern Pennsylvania, it's more difficult for us. Okay, so this is where I teach and I see this all the time. So by choosing two people in your life, I started out with my dogs because they were easy for me, you know? So you could start out with pets, right? Something really easy. It's a way in often. So that's where I want you to work for a while, because where we expand to as we go on, and we'll explore this a little, okay? But I'm not going to push you too hard or push you too far, okay? But the metta practices traditionally start with you, then you invite in somebody you love, that's easy to care for and love, that has your relationship is easy. And then we invite in a neutral person, somebody we don't really know but we see often, that we don't have any kind of attachments to. I always pick the guy at the UPS store in Edwardsville. Gabe, does everybody know him? Right? He's just the nicest. Yeah, they're always singing. Every time I go there, I'm happy, right? And so I use him because I think, well, he's pretty easy and neutral. He fits both categories, right? And then we invite in somebody that's difficult, but not the most difficult person in your life. So we don't want to root up trauma in the metta practice, but somebody that you wish it was a little easier with, right? We could all relate to that. We all have those people. Okay, so we invite them in, and then we keep opening it up. We could open it up to just this circle, for instance. So every being in this room, and then perhaps opening it up to the building. All of the members of the Westmoreland Club, for instance. And then we could open it up to our city or our country or the cosmos. That's where it ends, right? I had a teacher that I worked with for a long time, and he opened it up to the cosmos and different dimensions of reality, and it was really kind of funky, right? So you could have some of that. But you only dip your toe in where you feel like it's going to be supportive and helpful. But supportive and helpful doesn't always mean easy. And supportive and helpful doesn't always mean that it's not going to kind of pull you into some strong emotion. All right? In Chinese cultures, in most Eastern cultures, but especially in Chinese medicine, in these practices in Tibetan culture, emotions aren't named as good or bad. They just are, right? So, anger's present. Okay, we talked about this. Keep it in the back seat, right? As long as it's not driving the car, we could work with it. But sometimes it jumps in and it throws us out of the driver's seat. Right? Sometimes it can be that strong. So I don't want you to feel like if you've been hijacked a little emotionally by whatever's coming up in these practices, that it's not for you. I absolutely believe that these practices heal. I've witnessed it myself. I've witnessed it with hundreds and hundreds of people I've taught, maybe thousands by now. I don't know. Okay? And if the metta practices need time, then give them time. None of this happens overnight. Yes, we're almost to the end of our lessons together, but this is just the beginning. So if what was most supportive for you as somebody new to these practices were just dropping into the breath moving in and out of your body, or the long exhale, or a standing practice, or even the crazy absorption practice that we did, use it. Work with it for a long time until you get bored of it and you get curious again. Okay, so that's the main message. But as we dig a little deeper into this stuff, I want you to know that you're not doing it wrong and you're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. And I'm not here to fix you. And needing a little extra support to sort things out and figure out how to deal with things that are coming up that feel overwhelming is just normal, right? And the more we talk about the stigma associated with strong emotions, the stigma associated with being emotionally challenged or having difficulties with your mental health or wellness has to end. Right? I want to be comfortable, and I want everyone else to be comfortable talking more about what's hard in this life, because it's not all easy. And the people that come into this building and pretend it to be so are lying. They're frauds. Okay? So, let's keep going. Any questions? Wow, that took a lot of time. It's 20 after 2 or 3. Okay, so I'm getting to my notes because I didn't print this out. Okay, so the main theme of today was to give you a tool to use to develop compassion towards yourself. What I would really like you to work on is I'd like you, does everyone have a journal that they could write in? Yeah, paper. You all have paper and a pen, right? And I'm sure you have some extra paper around if they need it.
Sure.
Okay? I'd like you to come up with 4 phrases or slogans that feel really supportive and authentic to you. Okay? And they don't have to start with may I. They could start with any words that you want them to. They could just be one word that feels really supportive. But I want you to come up with 4 phrases of your own that you could work with and use. Okay? Because that's a way in too. The more connected you feel to those phrases, the more helpful they will be in getting you there. You could even have 5. I wouldn't go more than 5. 4 or 5 is kind of ideal because you want to be able to memorize them and say them without kind of looking at some point. So in the beginning, you may have to read them to yourselves, and that's okay. Okay? You could even come up with using them in different situations that you might feel like you need more support in. Secondly, the second homework assignment. So a couple things this week. I want you to notice when you get really reactive. Okay? What's triggering you? Really know your triggers. So if something happens when you're here at work, just note it. Wow, I feel really triggered right now. And don't try to get into the whys, but just notice what it is that triggered you and see if you could write that down. Okay? And I'm not going to check this. You're not going to share it with us or the group. This is just for you to know. Okay? Because what we're really trying to develop here is understanding reactivity and understanding that we always have a window, a choice, a space where we could choose a different response or a response that's not going to make the triggering worse. Have you ever heard of the name Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl. Has anyone ever heard of that name? Maybe?
Maybe I've read it.
You probably read it. So I'm going to share a quote with you from Viktor Frankl in a second. But Viktor Frankl was a doctor. He was a psychiatrist. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor. He's passed now. But when he came to the concentration camps, they kept him alive because he was an expert in his field of psychiatry. And they forced him to do horrible things to people and run horrible tests. And he witnessed all the people that he loved die. And the only way that he was able to survive all of that was by recognizing that his response was absolutely the only thing that was under his control. He had absolutely zero control of anything else in his life. And that's true for all of us. So his quote, which you may or may not, sorry about this, it keeps fading out, which you may or may not remember, here it is. I don't want to get it wrong because it's so powerful. between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in this space resides your power to choose your response, and therein lies your freedom. People only have control over you when you're reactive. When you choose the response, that's where you find your freedom. And when we recognize that there's a little gap there between the trigger coming in and the reactivity, when we realize that there's just enough space there that we could pause, and in that pause is where the space gets bigger and we become more powerful, and the freedom feels as big as that big bright blue sky, the more comfortable we get in the pause and the more confident we get in the response. And we could respond in a way where oftentimes the person that's triggering you or the situation that's triggering you just kind of dissolves. So in other words, you're not adding fuel to that fire. So there's a short video that I want to share, and I think it'll just turn on, right, John? If I just plug in. Okay. John's been awesome, by the way, because I was here all day yesterday doing presentations, and he figured it all out for me. How it's gonna, let's see. So this is another Holocaust survivor, and this is his story. And her book, her name is Dr. Edith Eger, and her book is called The Choice. And so it's relevant to everything that we've talked about today. Oh, except if we can't hear it.
I have to turn the TV up.
Okay, all right, here let me rewind it then, so you don't miss the story.
It's on the side.
Okay. Oh, you showed me this yesterday. Is that good? 20?
Yeah,
Okay.
My sister Magda, who loved her hair, she didn't leave the house until she would turn around in such a way that her hair would not, God forbid, move. So when we arrive, I don't know what's happening. I see the sign. I see us being pushed around. I see me not being treated as a person at all. And I don't know what's going to happen. We are shaped. Magda had hair in her palms, crying. She asked me, how do I look? And that's when the choices come in. Whether you choose to point out what's wrong with someone, whether you choose to point out what's missing, good. And luckily, somehow I realized that I became Magda's mirror. I better tell her what she still has. And I didn't lie at all. And I said, Magda, you have beautiful eyes. And you know what? I can see it when you had your hair all over the place.
Isn't Isn't that beautiful? So these choices, when we build them for ourselves, we start recognizes that there's so many choices available to us for compassion and kindness and lifting the people around us up in such a beautiful way. But the inner work is where it starts. That's where it starts. Okay? Guys, thank you so much. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here for a few minutes, of course, and certainly reach out if we could help in any way. Okay?